Last week, Rabbi, you asked, mentioned about the potential of snow and getting to the court. How'd that turn out?
Yes. Well, I mean the roads were clear by Tuesday morning, so that
Right,
was, I mean, more or less, it was
right.
fine. The Everything went well. I mean, it was the first time that I did an accompaniment for immigration court as opposed to like ICE check-ins and stuff like that. So it was a different experience. I mean, it went well. I mean, first of all, um, you know, the young man was not detained. He was given a continuance for another about 10 weeks. It was a very different experience. I mean, everybody in our group, and there were like five of us in the company group, most of whom had been to immigration court before, and they said that this was a good judge. That he was, he gave everybody a fair shake, made sure that everybody was able to understand their rights and understand the charges and the situation against them. I was pleased that everybody thought that he was a good judge because it was Judge Rubenstein. Um, but I mean, I would say, I should not be recording this. Okay, so now we'll share the screen. All right, and Alan told me he has a conflict tonight, so um, one of the reasons why I record this. All right. So, like I said, we sort of stopped in the middle of Mishnah 5, so maybe we'll go back to the beginning of 5, but the part that we did kind of do quickly. So Rabbi Ishmael, his son, that is the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, said, if you learn Torah in order to teach, it is granted to him, that is to say, from above, that is to say, from God. It is granted to him the opportunity both to study and to teach. And if you learn in order to practice, which is like a higher level, so you are given the opportunity to learn, to teach, to observe, and to practice. And that's as far as we got. So now we go to Rabbi Tzodok said, Rabbi Tzodok Omer, Al ta'asem atara lehit kadel bahem below kardom lachpor behem. So do not make them meaning the words of Torah, a crown for self exaltation, nor a spade with which to dig. All right, don't make the words of Torah a crown for self exaltation or a spade with which to dig. Okay, so now the question, what does that mean? Yeah. Marilyn, gotta unmute.
Okay. Is a spade to dig is to dig further into the meaning of things? Is that the way it's used?
No,
No.
No, the opposite. I
A
mean, not
spade
the
to cover
opposite is a little
up?
bit. No, it's used. It's a metaphor.
Oh.
Okay. So, all right. So, um, when it says don't make them a crown for self exaltation, yeah, Leslie.
I think it means don't use it to make yourself better, or to make it seem like you're more knowledgeable than everybody else, or that you're better than everybody else.
The
Like,
first part, the
yeah, the
crown for
first
self
part.
exaltation, right?
Right.
Right, exactly. Like don't study Torah so that you will receive the honor that rabbis get. I mean, clearly that's an anachronistic text.
And the
Um,
spade part is, I think, don't use it to make to dig, like, to, I wouldn't say embarrass other people, or dig at other people to
no, what it means is that I mean, or let's say what it is understood to mean. Let's put it that way. Um, it, it is understood to mean don't study Torah as a way of making a living, frankly. Like don't you know that the purpose of studying Torah is to learn Torah and to learn Torah so that you can pass it on to others, right? I mean, that's right. That's the first part of this Mishnah, right? That if you learn Torah in order to teach, that's good, right? You're given the opportunity to learn and to teach. And if you learn Torah so that you could practice the mitzvot, then you are given the opportunity to learn, to teach, and to practice, right? So that um, we study Torah, first of all, for its own sake, and second of all, to practice and to teach, not to make a living per se, right? Like, no, I mean, again, nobody, I mean, all right. So the first part about, don't study Torah because you want the honor that is given to rabbis. And I said that's anachronistic. That was a bit sarcastic. I mean, yeah, rabbis are still given honor, but not like to the extent that they were in, previous generations, right? But in terms of like don't study Torah in order to make a living. Like, I mean, rabbis certainly make a decent living, but most people who are rabbis could have made more money had they chosen a different profession,
Mhm.
right? I mean, the skills that are necessary to be a rabbi are not that different than the skills that are necessary to be a lawyer. And lawyers, as a rule, make more money than rabbis. Um, so that it's not, um, you know, very few people, I think, become rabbis because it is a lucrative profession. Again, it's not like, certain, yes, rabbis make a decent living, but like I say, given the skill and given the years of study, which is, I think, something that most people don't realize, that it takes longer to become a rabbi than to become a lawyer. The rabbinical school is a 5 or 6 year postgraduate program. Um, so it is. All right. So med school is only 4 years, but then you have residency and then fellowship and so on and so forth. So that so it takes slightly longer to become a doctor than to become a rabbi, but it takes, law school is 3 years, and then like you can go right into practice. You could do a clerkship, but you could go right into practice. So, um, so it is in that sense a bit of an anachronistic um, text. Um, but all right, so Rabbi Tzada, all right, so וכך היה הלל אומר, ודאישתמש בתג החלף. All right, so Hillel says, and I should note, by the way, that this phrase is the next phrase, the phrase attributed to Hillel is in Aramaic, which is unusual in the Mishnah, because the Mishnah is in Hebrew, and not only Hebrew, but Mishnaic Hebrew, which is like considered like very, very good, literate, like really sort of like the highest level of Hebrew, like kind of like, I don't know, equivalent maybe to Shakespearean English or something. Um, and he that puts the crown to his own use shall perish. Halamadita, therefore you learn, or thus you have learned. Kol hanehene midivrei Torah notel hayav min ha'olam. Anyone who derives worldly benefit from the words of Torah removes his life from the world. Okay, in other words, it is considered a bad thing by the Mishnah to use the Torah for um, financial gain. Okay, now you may ask yourself, this being the case, how is it that rabbis are paid? Right? And it's, no, it's not an unreasonable question. Okay. And so now, of course, since this is a system designed by rabbis, right? There is, often a workaround. Okay, so in theory, and this is like rabbinic contracts are written this way more in Orthodox community than everywhere else, but in theory, a rabbi is not paid a salary for being a rabbi. A rabbi is paid what's known as schar b'telah, which means I don't even know how to translate that into English, but it means that you are essentially paid compensation for the fact that the time you devote to your work as a rabbi is time that you cannot devote to earning money in some other way. Right? And as I said, most of us who are rabbis could have made more money had we chosen a different profession, right? But we are compensated for the fact that, as I said, the time that we spend being rabbis is time that we can't spend like doing something else that would bring in money. Yeah, Leslie.
Well, isn't it comparable to when the high priests were in the temple and and people left food for them, or they got the leftover food because that was their payment, in other words, because they had to eat.
Yeah, sure. Right. No, no, that, I mean, that's correct. And that's really, I mean, that's a good analogy, right? Because the I mean, not just the priest, but the Levites as well, because when the land was divvied up, right? So right, obviously, we spent hundreds of years in slavery in Egypt, right? Nobody had any land in Israel. And then when we entered the land and conquered it, the land was divvied up by lot among the tribes. Okay, but the tribe of Levi did not get land in that lottery. Why? Because they were busy serving in the temple, right? And so um, they didn't they didn't get land because they didn't have the time to be farmers because they were doing other stuff, and therefore the rest of society had to support them. um and it is actually a good analogy, right? I mean, they received compensation for the fact that they were not given land, because they did not have time to be farmers because they were busy working in the temple. So that's exactly really the same thing, that rabbis don't have time to, work as greeters in Walmart or whatever, because of the time that we spend, being rabbis. So yeah, I mean, that's not I didn't think of it, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it is very much the same thing. So I want to thank you, my fellow Kohen, for 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 no, but I think that that's right. Now, of course, when I was a Hillel rabbi, it was easy because I mean, obviously, nobody else in this group has ever been a Hillel rabbi, but I can tell you that Hillel rabbis spend lots of time moving furniture. Um, and so I used to say that, that the rabbi stuff I did for free, I was paid for moving furniture. Um, which is why people who start their careers as Hillel rabbis have a tendency to spend 10, 15 years and then move on to doing something else, because after a while, moving furniture becomes more difficult and less enjoyable the older you get. But yeah, Sue.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I have a question. So the rabbis in the Mishnah, they were interpreting different parts of the Torah and what it meant. And, so my question is, why didn't, I mean, I know we're interpreting from the Hebrew, but it doesn't look like they just came right out and said, it's like we are now interpreting what they said. Like, did this rabbi really mean this, or did this rabbi, like, why didn't they read it and in their commentary or discussions speak in an everyday language that we would know exactly what they meant, and we wouldn't have to interpret what they said.
All right. Well, I mean, I think there are a couple of reasons that that would occur to me. One is that unlike the rest of the Mishnah, Avot is not primarily a legal text, right? In other words, um, look, I mean, there are different different types of questions that people ask me as a rabbi, right? I mean, if you ask me, um, what time does Shabbat start, right? Or is catfish a kosher species, right? I mean, these are sort of like questions that have objective answers, right? And if I answer it in a sort of cryptic or unclear or multivalent way that can be understood in many different blah 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 blah, that doesn't really do you any good, right? I mean, these are like objective questions that have a correct answer, and I should answer them in a direct, unequivocal manner, right? Why does God allow evil? Right? That is a question that it legitimately has a lot of different perspectives, and does should not be answered in that kind of like just the facts, ma'am, sort of way. Okay, so and of I mean, the whole rest of the Mishnah is legal material. Avot is not legal material. It is primarily more philosophical material, right? So in that sense, it's almost inevitable that the texts are going to require interpretation. Um, and I think that represents, in a certain way, the rabbinic penchant for dialogical study. Okay, I mean, I'll give you like a real life something that happened earlier today. Okay, because classically, in the Jewish tradition, you do not just sit and learn by yourself, right? You always have a study partner, Havruta, right? And um, so the details don't matter that much, right? But um, I'm on the resolutions committee of the Rabbinical Assembly. The resolution that is coming up for consideration, that I believe that the goal of the resolution is good. Nevertheless, I vehemently object to the resolution because it reverses a policy that the Rabbinical Assembly has held for 76 years, since 1950. And doesn't really say, like, call attention to the fact that, oh, we are changing our policy of 76 years, and this is why. Um, and so I have a real problem with the resolution. Having said that, the rabbi who proposed the resolution is somebody I've known for a long time, somebody I really respect. And so I'm trying to figure out how to proceed. So I've been exchanging emails with the RA staff person who staffs the resolution committee, and we went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And finally I said, I know what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to handle it. And she wrote back and said, makes perfect sense. I think that's the right way to go. And I wrote back to her and I said, thank you for helping me clarify my own thinking, right? Because I think best by thinking aloud. I really do. Or, in this case, it wasn't aloud, it was by email, so it wasn't aloud per se. But, if I just sort of have to sit and think things through, I am much better off like bouncing my ideas off another person. Um, and so I wrote back to her and I said, thank you for helping me clarify my thinking. It's no accident that we study with a study partner. Even though she actually like did not contribute that much to my sort of stream of consciousness series of emails, but nevertheless, being able to bounce an idea off another person was helpful. And that's the way we learn. So I don't think that they necessarily wanted to be like bullet point prescriptive, um, particularly in a context in which it wasn't necessary. But I acknowledge that that can be frustrating, right? Because sometimes, and I'm sure I'm sure that at times I cause people frustration in that sense because they're like, Rabbi, I didn't come to you for a whole lecture and soliloquy. I came to you, for a yes or no. Um, but sometimes just because you want a yes or no doesn't mean I can give you a yes or no, right? And it's just that's just not the way it's just not the way the system really functions. It is meant to be right because if you look, all right, and so we're studying the Mishnah, we're not studying the Gemara, right? But the Gemara always preserves the minority opinion, right? And if it's just meant to be ruled, boom, 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 why do we need to preserve the minority opinion? Right? But we need to preserve the minority opinion, first of all, so that we can understand the majority opinion. And second of all, because times change and circumstances change. And what was once the majority opinion could, under other circumstances, be the opinion that we need to follow when circumstances have changed. All right. So, all right. So, thank you for that as well. Go on. Um, all right. So we're on to Mishnah 6. Rabbi Yosei Omer Kol HaMechabed Et HaTorah Gufo Mechubad Al HaBriot. Rabbi Yosei said, whoever honors the Torah is himself honored by other people. V'chol hamechalel et Torah gufo mechulal al habriot, and anybody who dishonors the Torah is himself dishonored by others, right? Which I don't know. To me, that actually seems both true and not that complicated. So maybe we don't have to spend, 20 minutes on this, but I'm open to it if somebody has a question or comment. But I think it's true. If you honor the, I mean, in a society that values Torah, obviously, right? I mean, that sort of is self-evident, right? But if you honor the Torah, you are honored. If you dishonor the Torah, you are dishonored, right? I mean, we discussed a couple of weeks ago the concept of Chilul Hashem, right? Desecration of the name, right? And there are certain things that if rabbis do them, or people who are not necessarily rabbis but who are sort of known to be Jewish and sort of publicly Jewish, um, it drags the whole community into disrepute, and worse than that, drags Judaism into disrepute. So I think that is a true and valid statement. Okay. Now, the next Mishnah is more complicated because this is, Sue, one of those Mishnayot that could, I mean, could actually have been written maybe a little bit clearer, and does require a lot of interpretation to be intelligible. Okay. Rabbi Yishmael Benor, that is, say, Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosei, says, "Hachoshech atzmo min hadin porek mimenu eva v'gezel ushvuat shav." One who refrains himself from judgment, and judgment, by the way, means sitting as a judge, okay, rids himself of enmity, robbery, and false swearing. Okay, now it is worth noting, and I probably should have said this a while ago, but when we read in the previous, or the one before that, Mishnah about like the concept of being paid, I mean pay, using the Torah for financial gain, and I discussed the sort of halachic difficulty with the fact that rabbis are paid. It should be noted that what rabbis do today, particularly in contemporary America and other Western countries that have separation of religion and state, is not what rabbis did 2,000 years ago or even 200 years ago, right? I mean, a rabbi classically was a judge, really. Where the job of a rabbi was to be a judge according to halacha, right? And therefore, the rabbi was not employed by a synagogue. The rabbi was employed by the town, or, I mean, the Jewish community of the town. Okay. And they did not, I mean, classically, a rabbi gave a sermon twice a year. Okay. On Shabbat Shuvah and Shabbat Hagadol. Let's say there, on the Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and the Shabbat right before Pesach. Those were the only two times that the rabbi gave a sermon. And the rabbi was a judge. People came and they had civil cases. I mean, mostly civil cases because very few Jewish communities had that level of autonomy that they could like have a criminal justice system. But where the Gentile government actually allowed the Jewish community autonomy, even in criminal matters, they would judge, criminal matters as well. So, having said that, then this Mishnah really becomes quite problematic, right? Because Rabbi Ishmael is basically saying, it's a good thing not to serve as a judge, right? Because if you serve as a judge, right? I mean, if you read this like, without any, commentary or like delving in, right? So, right, because if you refrain from serving, I'm sorry, I couldn't. I was looking at the Mishnah, so I can't like see the.
That's okay. I
Yeah,
was just
go
going to
ahead.
say, if you're a judge, somebody's not going to like you because you
Exactly.
have to judge
Right.
against somebody. So if you don't judge, you save yourself from, from enemy. I mean, you won't make enemies and you won't make anybody happy or whatever. That's what that first part is saying.
Correct. But it's the job of a rabbi to judge, right? I mean, so yes, right? Look, if you want everybody to like you, then do not be a judge, right? But if you want everybody to like you, then do not ever take a stand on any issue under the sun, right? In which case, people will dislike you because you don't stand for anything, right? I mean, look, I mean, I'm not a test tube baby. I mean, my dad was a member of the board of the synagogue where I grew up for, most of my childhood. Um, and we liked our rabbi very much. And my dad and our rabbi were close. I mean, they were tennis partners, and my grandmother babysat the rabbi's kids and so on and so forth. But the one area where my dad was frequently critical of our rabbi was my dad felt that the rabbi was reluctant to take a stand. And the rabbi said that it was he said that my dad's criticism of him was wrong, and it wasn't like being wishy-washy. It was, he called it dynamic indecision. um, but right, I mean, look, the minute you take a stand for something, somebody's going to be upset with you, right? um so that is undoubtedly true, right? But if you are a rabbi 2,000 years ago or 1,900 years ago, that's your job, right? So, but what Bartanura says, and I think correctly, is what Rabbi Ishmael means is don't sort of take it upon yourself to judge a case if there are other rabbis around who are more qualified than you. right? Which I think is good advice and something still that rabbis do. I mean, it doesn't happen. Look, the older, right? Obviously, the older you get, the more experience you have and the more knowledge you have, and so on and so forth. So it is not that frequent that somebody will come to me with a question, particularly a halachic question, and I'll say, you know what, let me consult other rabbis and get back to you, right? But it does happen. It does happen. Um, particularly where I feel that either like I really don't know, um, or it's not necessarily a purely halachic question, but a meta halachic question, right? But I'll give you an example of what I mean by a meta halachic question. Okay, the first time that I dealt with it, and also like once you asked the question and got an answer, and the second time that the sort of identical or almost identical situation presents itself, you don't need to ask the question anymore, right? But so in my first pulpit, not my first job, but my first pulpit, which was in York, Pennsylvania, and the son of a congregant died. Okay, he went out for a jog and had a massive coronary and died. Okay, which is not uncommon, which is why I don't jog. But but no, but so he had, and he was a Hollywood producer, okay, and the congregation was in York, Pennsylvania. And on top, and so he lived in L.A. His wife wasn't Jewish. He was cremated. Okay, now obviously, right, everybody knows that cremation is not allowed under halacha, right? But I was not asked, is it okay, to cremate this guy, right? I wasn't his rabbi. I was his mother's rabbi. So anyway, so he was cremated and buried in LA. His mother, who was my congregant, said, I would like to have a memorial service for my son in the shul with you officiating because he was from here. I'm here. All of my friends are here. And obviously, people didn't go out to LA for his funeral. Can I have a memorial service here in the shul? And as I said, it was my first pulpit. Here's what I knew, right? Cremation is contrary to halacha. That wasn't the question I was asked, right? Right. So I called Rabbi Elliot Dorff, who some of you may be familiar with him or his writing. I mean, he's one of the more prominent conservative rabbis when it comes certainly to halacha and Jewish thought. He has been on and off the head of the law committee for many years. And I said, so what should I do? And he asked me a couple questions. He said, um, did the mother decide that he should be cremated? No. Okay. This service is not really for the honor of the son. It's for the honor of the mother, right? She is not the one who decided that her son should be cremated, right? So if you decline to officiate, you're punishing the mother who, like, you're punishing her for a decision that she did not make. And she's like suffering enough by the fact that she lost her son, right? So go ahead and do it. So I did. All right. So the next time I was, faced with an analogous situation, I didn't have to ask the question anymore, right? But that is an example of what I would consider a meta halachic question, right? Because what's a halachic question, right? Is it permissible to cremate somebody? That's a halachic question that has a halachic answer. No, right? That's not the question I was asked, right? The question I was asked is, given the fact that this person has been, right, what do you do now, right? So that really is kind of a meta halachic question. And that's where you really sort of, I think, are wise to consult somebody else. But like I said, I don't think I need to, you know, every time I'm faced with an analogous situation, right? I got it, once. And anyway, um, so, but yeah, so if some, now it is true that, right, that you will, um, even if there is a more qualified, more experienced rabbi around to judge the case, um, you know, so probably that rabbi will be subject to enmity instead of you. But I think also the presumption is that, the wiser and more experienced you are as a rabbi, the less likely you are to, to be subjected to hostility by the losing party in the case that you judge, because, all right, they possibly will respect you more, right? Because you are now older and wiser, but also, you'd probably do a better job explaining and justifying your decision. But having said that, yes, I mean, right, somebody asks you for a ruling and you give them a ruling that they don't like, you may, you know, receive hostility. There's just no two ways about that. But Gezel, that is to say, robbery, um, how is refraining from judgment, particularly when there are other rabbis around who are more qualified than you? Um, how does that keep you as the rabbi slash judge from robbery? Anybody? All right. Marilyn, as an accountant, so you have a client, okay, and you advise the client that they owe tax on a certain transaction,
Okay.
when in fact, that you actually have made a mistake and they do not owe tax on that transaction. Having listened to you and taken your advice, they go ahead and pay tax that they don't really owe. You have, in essence, participated in theft from that client,
Okay.
right? Because you are responsible for them spending money that they don't really owe, right? I mean, it's a novel way of thinking, but it's not crazy. I think, right? So that if I am a rabbi and I issue a civil judgment against one of the litigants who appears before me, and that's an erroneous judgment, I have stolen from that litigant. Now, I haven't, I'm not the one who benefits from the theft, right? Just like you, right? I mean, Uncle Sam benefits from the theft, or Uncle Wes, or Uncle Mark, not you, right? But you have participated in theft, in essence,
Which,
right? Yeah,
okay, so in my case, if it was an error, it might be caught by IRS. They might say, you don't owe this money and give it
right.
back. Okay.
They might.
But there would be, if, next year the client goes to someone else who looks at my work and said, this was wrong, it can be appealed. At the rabbinic level, is there a court of appeal?
Classically, there is not.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, in Israel, where the rabbinic courts have governmental authority, there is.
Okay.
Okay, because that was, I mean, when the state of Israel was created, um, orthodoxy had less power then in society than it does now, right? And so they were bargaining on an equal foot, as opposed to, having, as LBJ once said, when you have them by the balls, their hearts and minds will follow. Which is now the situation, right? But so classically in halacha, there's no appeals court, right? So when they were setting up the judicial structure, Ben Gurion and his folks said, we are not going to give you state-backed authority without the system of appeals courts. And they said, okay, fine. Also, classically, women are not allowed to testify in rabbinic courts. They are in Israel because, again, Ben Gurion et al. Said, we're not going to give you government-backed authority, and women can't testify in court. Oh, okay, right. So, but I mean, the way the system works now, and we'll wrap up with this, right? I mean, and here it's really more or less an honor system, right? Because I mean, I have no governmental backed authority, right? So, I mean, so somebody comes to me and, a rabbi, is catfish a kosher species, right? Which is not I mean, there are some, you know, fish that, well, some people say this, some people say that. It depends on how you define it. All right. That might be the case with swordfish. It is absolutely not the case with catfish. All right. So somebody comes to me, Rabbi, is catfish kosher? No, it's treif. Okay, fine. So they leave my office and they say, oh, I knew I shouldn't have asked. I really like catfish. And so they go out and eat catfish anyway, right? God may get them. I don't know. But I have no authority to enforce my ruling, right? So it's really an honor system, right? So, but the way it works now is that if you have a halakhic question, you are absolutely entitled to pose that question to whichever rabbi you want to. Okay, what you cannot do is go from rabbi to rabbi until you get the ruling that you want.
Judge shopping.
Right. Judge. No, you can judge shop in the sense of you can pick whatever, you can go to whatever judge you want to.
Mhm.
But, so for example, I mean, and they're, look, I mean, particularly well-known rabbis, their proclivities are known. Okay, so that, like, I mentioned Rabbi Elliot Dorff. Okay, I mean, there are certain things. I mean, there are, again, there's no like official system, but there is an unofficial kind of rabbinic hierarchy. Okay, and there are a handful of rabbis within the conservative movement who are known as poskim, that is to say, as decisors, right? That if you have a halakhic question, right? I mean, nobody's going to come to me for a halakhic question. I mean, no other rabbi is going to come to me with a halakhic question. Okay, they may come to me with other questions because I've been around a while and there are certain subjects that I know about and blah 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 blah. But I am the 900th most qualified conservative rabbi in the world in terms of halacha. But if you have a halakhic question, you're going to go to Rabbi Elliot Dorff, or you're going to go to Rabbi Joel Roth, or you're going to go to Rabbi Avram Reisner, maybe Rabbi Daniel Nevins. I mean, they're a handful, right? And so, like, so now somebody has come to me and like, am I looking for a liberal ruling or an illiberal ruling, right? And so I know which rabbi to go to based on the characteristic of the ruling that I'm looking for. Okay. But having said that, right? So I mean, this question about just a second, okay? So this question about a memorial service, right, requested to me by the mother of a son who was cremated, right? I mean, my inclination was I felt that I should do this, right? And I knew that. I mean, I didn't know that Rabbi Dorff would say yes. Okay, I did know that Rabbi Dorff was more likely to say yes than Rabbi Roth, right? So I went to Rabbi Dorff. If I went to Rabbi Dorff and Rabbi Dorff surprised me and said no, that's it. I can't like say, well, Dorff did not give me the ruling that I want, so I'm going to go to another rabbi, and then if they don't give me the rule, I'm going to go to third rabbi, so on and so forth. You can pick the rabbi that you want to go to, and you can absolutely figure in what you know about their tendencies. But if they surprise you, you're stuck. Okay, you can't go from rabbi to rabbi. Okay, yeah, Leslie. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say you can shop around for a rabbi before you ask the question. But once you ask the question to the rabbi, you have to accept whatever that rabbi said.
Correct. Correct. Right. I mean, in theory, I mean, it's not enforceable. I mean, again, it may be enforceable up there. It's not enforceable down here. So yeah, I mean, so that's yes, but that's the way the system, right? The system has rules, right? We can't enforce them, but the system does have rules. And so, by that same token, um, of course, I'm not an idiot, right? So I would not, I mean, so let us say that I did go to Rabbi Dorf and he surprised me and gave me a decision that I did not like. So I have now decided, knowing full well that this is not proper, I'm going to ask Rabbi Reisner. Okay, now I would not be stupid enough to say, call up Rabbi Reisner and say, Avram, I have a question for you. I already spoke to Elliot. Elliot said no, but I really am looking for a yes. So here's my question, right? Because if I did that, even if he was inclined to give me a yes, he would say to me, Charles, I can't, right? I can't answer the question. You just told me you asked Elliot Dorf. He gave you the answer you didn't want, so now you've come to me. If you had come to me first, I might have given you the answer that you want. But now, right, knowing that you've already asked somebody else, I can't give you an answer, right? That's just not the way the system works, right? And similarly, like, somebody comes to me with a halachic question, all right, and if they're just a random whatever, but if I know they belong to a different shul, I'm supposed to say, look, you got to ask your own rabbi, right? You're not supposed to ask me, because that's just, that's sort of like, I don't trespassing, let's say, right? Overstepping your bounds. All right. Anything else? Great. Thank you very much. This was a fun discussion. I enjoyed it very much. And Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.